I forgot that I have my presentation right here, and I moved it from here, my computer, to back there, but I haven't figured out how yet to connect my computer to the computer up here. So I have my notes on here, and I just want to make sure that I have them. Otherwise, it's kind of like flying blind. So, okay. The under 35 crowd can get it done. It's let's see here. Okay. Well, good morning. I'm glad to be here. Hopefully, you are too. And I'm convinced that that Lionel Richie probably when he wrote his song "Easy Like Sunday Morning," was not a member of the church. If he is now, and certainly probably didn't teach Sunday school. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult. So we're going to get started here in just a second once I get this thing pulled up. And there we go. Brother Garth, would you lead us in a word of prayer when we get started? Amen. Thank you. Last week, we began our study, and it was kind of an overview of what we'd be covering for this quarter, and at least for half of this quarter. We talked about the existence of God and knowing that He exists, and from the beginning. And I felt like it was an easy sell, given the audience that we have here. So it wasn't too hard of a sell. So we're going to kind of delve more into that. We know from Genesis 1:1 it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." In the beginning. Like any school-age boy, I was enamored with science and with things that pertain to the observable world. And I was really into dinosaurs, like really into, almost unhealthily into dinosaurs. One of the hang-ups that you encounter, and it kind of slides in under the radar when you're young and you're in school, is in the very beginning when you talk about dinosaurs. It says billions and billions of years ago. In his book, Out with Doubt, Kyle Butt talks about this situation where it's a school classroom, and the teacher, Mr. Henson, is up there presenting a lesson, and he starts asking the students questions on, where did this come from? What happened at the beginning? And one student raises their hand and says, we at the very beginning there was this big bang, and from there the universe came into existence. And then he goes, "Oh, that's right." And then he calls on another student, and then he says, "Where did that was 13.8 billion years ago or so." And then calls on another student. The other student, he says, "Where did life start?" And he says, "Well, there was." The student answers and says, "Well, there was this pool of organic matter, and at some point, lightning struck that organic matter, and it created the first single-cell organisms. And from that, we get, from the evolution of that, we get life. We get what we see here today. One would argue that it takes more faith to believe those things than it does to believe in the God of the Bible. Would you agree? So we, presenter here. So we're commanded to give an answer, and I'm going to continue going through this book, this little booklet, the Believe the Bible booklet, and if you weren't here last week, a large portion of this is just going to be simple yes or no answers, real simple, small, short answers, and the questions kind of go as follows. You can see this is the introduction here, and and this was a study written by Rob Whitaker of House to House, Heart to Heart, and these can be available for you if you request them. You don't really need one for this class. We're going to kind of go through it up here. I did want to show you, though, and I didn't explain this. When we do go through this study, when you look at it and you see the picture with the spiral binding on the side, that's me going back to this little booklet here. So we're not just going to go into this booklet. That'd be a really, really quick study for this class if we were just to go through this booklet here. But we're going to expound on some of these ideas, and so we're going to deviate from this just a little bit sometimes. But it's questions like this. Do you believe it is possible that there's an energy at the beginning that cannot be created or destroyed, and that could have been responsible for creating the world? We're going to go into that in a little bit more depth today. And then would you be open to the possibility that this energy could be called God? So this is in our attempts to convert someone who is a non-believer, someone who doesn't believe in God, or maybe is an agnostic, doesn't know about God, or perhaps they are, and this is a new one for me, they are a creationary evolutionist. There's new terms being invented every day, it seems. And I wanted to talk about this. So when you're talking to someone and you're trying to give them what you know is the truth, you have to also remember that they have their truth as well. Everybody comes with their own truth, and what they have learned, what they believe. Everyone has their own version of what they believe, and so you kind of have to go to them, with a mindset of. You have to kind of go to them with a mindset of, well, I have to convince them. I have to defend what my points are, and I have to convince them. In legal terms, the symbol of justice and the symbol of law are the scales of justice. And you've seen the statue, Lady Justice. She's blindfolded, and she's holding the scales, and she's got a sword in the other hand. And that's kind of symbolic of what the justice system should be. In legal terms, a preponderance of evidence is the standard of proof in most civil cases, requiring that a claim is more likely than not. In other words, it's a greater than 50% chance that this is so to be true. It is defined as the greater weight of evidence, tipping the scale slightly to prove that a fact is more probable than its non-existence. So a study in Christian evidences kind of helps provide that burden of proof. We kind of are learning how we can go about teaching someone who maybe doesn't have that belief in God. So what are some proofs that we know of? What are some proofs that we know of that can help us tip those scales in our favor when we're studying with say, a non-believer? How do we know that there is a God, Shane? Sorry. Incredible design, yeah. Every design has a designer. Every design has a designer, right? What other things? What are some other things that we can know from what we observe gives us evidence that there is a God. Everything has a purpose. As Kurt said, he says everything has a purpose, and everything that's been created has a purpose to serve, and the universe shows us that. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Yeah. So things don't move from a state of worse to better. In other words, things don't move from disorder to order. That's that that analogy of that we talked about last week was a computer full of parts. You know, how long would it take if you just put those computer parts and they're all there, all the computers parts were there. How long would it take for you to just put them in a box and let them sit before they made themselves into a computer? Yeah, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen. I'm gonna take off my shoe for a second. I've never seen this glass before. All right, so I'm gonna take off my shoe for a second. So I'm gonna hide my sock back behind here so you can't see that. So, existence of God. How can you prove the existence of God from a shoe? It had a purpose, right? It's to cover up my gangsta feet. So, it's got a purpose, right? It shows that it was designed. You can see that it was designed from the stitch work in here. Now, this is not an expensive shoe, but you can see from the stitch work in here that it had a design, that it had a purpose. The laces have a purpose. They have a design, so that you can keep them on your feet. If you look closely, you can even see the designer on here, or the manufacturer on here. You can see that it says discover true comfort. There's another purpose, right? It's got a flex sole. It's got gel inserts in here. I know it seems like I'm bragging on this shoe, but I got it on clearance. The purpose of a shoe and how it proves that the God of the universe exists. It has all of those things. It has all those attributes. And then you say, well, that doesn't really prove anything. How does that prove existence? Well, who made that shoe? Who made that shoe? Some person probably look like me. No, I mean it made halfway around the world, and some person made that. Some person sat at and probably more realistic, it was a group of people, right? It was a group of people on an assembly line putting these things together. And who designed them? Who designed that person? Who created that person? Let's see. Let's not even go back that far. Let's just go back to who created that person. Well, you can see that they had parents. They probably have a last name where you could trace them back to their parents. And with God's help, they helped make that person. And so you can go back as far as you want. And when we talk about the origins of the universe, there's only so far that you can go back. There's only so far that you can go back. If you're adopting the idea of the Big Bang theory, it is a theory, if you're adopting the idea of the Big Bang Theory, there's only so far that you can go back before you run out of time. And what we're going to find is that for scientific arguments to exist and to prove themselves, the one thing that they need lots of is time. So these arguments about cosmic inflation and Big Bang and macroevolution, microevolution, all those theories require gobs and gobs and gobs of time. They require lots of time. And so, how do we come across the scientists coming to the conclusion that the universe is 13.8 billion years old? They use math. They use math, and they say, well, this is what I can observe. And so taking these numbers or taking these observations, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the math and do the equations, and I'm going to come down to this conclusion from what they observe. And so it is impossible to prove that God does not exist. Let me say that again. It is not possible to prove that God does not exist. True or false? True statement? So then what is our aim then when we're talking to somebody who doesn't have belief? We just have to provide them with enough doubt in what they currently believe to sway them in that direction. You know, we want to reach people with the gospel. You know, we want to get to heaven. Hopefully everybody in here wants to get to heaven, and I'm fairly certain that everybody in here does. And we ought to want to take as many people there as we can. And so, in order to do that, we're going to have to reach a lot of these people who have no belief in God. And so, to help us get there, we have to sort of poke holes in their logic and their line of thinking as they sit right now. And you know, it is impossible to prove that God does not exist, not empirically at least, not what you can observe and what you can see, without relying on feelings and values. I read an article just the other day. He was talking about he talked about how he was at one time a theist and actually considered going into ministry at one point. The writer of this did, and I forgive me, I kind of forgot where I saw this, but he talked about how his proof that God did not exist stemmed from the Holocaust, and how, you know, that God could not exist because he allowed the Holocaust to happen. And we're going to get into that. That'll be a discussion that we have next week, is the anthropological study of or argument that God does exist. We'll get into that next week. That is a study for next week. See, I learned that from our class back there. And I have to remember that I'm on two separate PowerPoints. So, getting back to our booklet here, does every building have a building requires a builder? So, does every house have a builder? And the answer to that is yes. Isn't it impossible for a house to build itself? Yeah. These are fairly simple. Wouldn't it be equally absurd to suggest that an infant could build a house? It's like, you know, you get the baby, the 3-month-old, and they grab your finger. The baby's so strong. Not strong enough to lift a hammer. So wouldn't it be equally absurd to suggest an infant could build a house? Why? Can't pick up a hammer, right? And if you can't pick up a hammer, if you handle a nail gun, probably can't handle one of those either. Probably can't handle a power saw, right? They lack the abilities to do so. They don't have the fine motor skills. They don't have the strength to do it. They can't. And can a house appear from nothing? So when we talk about the ontological deals with existence and the reality of things. You know, there's three realities. One, and we can go back to my shoe. One is that my shoe has always existed. It's always been there from before history, before the beginning of time. It's always existed. It's always going to exist. So there's one. There's one scenario. So the shoe was always there. Number two, the shoe appeared from nothing. It was just there one day. You were walking down the road, and boom, there's the shoe. Or three, somebody created that shoe. There was a maker. Somebody made that shoe. So, house is the same thing. House was it always there? Was the house always in existence? Was it there from before we have record? And will it always be there? No. Did it appear from nothing? No. And that leaves us with only one plausible scenario, is that somebody built that house. So every house has to have a builder. Hebrews 3:4, for every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. So it applies to that house, and it applies to the universe. Any comments or questions? Cosmic inflation theory. So, how many of you have ever heard of cosmic inflation theory? I'm not an expert in this. My background is music education, so it has very little to do with cosmic inflation theory. But what I've been able to glean from the studies that I've had is that 21st century scientists. This is a fairly recent thing, but 21st century scientists. It's anything from 2000 on. They theorize that the universe did not begin with a singularity. That's with the Big Bang, the initial Big Bang. What we know as the Big Bang is matter started from we'll get to that in a second because that's another argument. Matter started, and then all of a sudden it just exploded, and that's causing the universe to expand outward. And that's observable. They've observed that. Scientists have observed, that galaxies are moving away from us. And the way that they observe those things is they say there's this concept called redshift and blue shift. Because light, the way that light works is it works in waves, much like sound works. And just like the Doppler effect affects the sound as something passes. Think about this. Think about an ambulance going by and the sirens that you hear. As they approach, they have a certain sound, and then the pitch increases because the sound waves compress as they get closer to your ears, and as they pass by, they expand. And so it sounds like, and the pitch goes up as it approaches, and it goes down as it passes you. And so light works in a lot of the same things. Longer wavelengths, red color is a longer wavelength. And so as something's moving away from you, it's got what's called redshift. As something's moving towards you, it's got something called blue shift. The color that we see in those galaxies changes, or stars in those bodies changes. So that's how that's one of the ways that they determine that the universe is expanding. But, where did that point of matter come from? Where did the start? Where was the start? Where did it come from? And then, so and this is going back to the Big Bang Theory, where did that point of matter come from? And then, what was here before that? And then what caused it? As we're going to learn in a little bit, every effect has a cause, right? So this is from a magazine article from 1988. And I said 21st century. I was mistaken because it was before that, obviously now. Alan Guth was a renowned scientist at the time, and he was asked the question in Omni magazine. He says, "How big was this very early pre-inflation universe?" So inflation deals with that it was already expanding, and then the Big Bang happened, and then it further pushed everything outward. So it says. What Alan Guth said was, he said it was amazingly small, about 10 to the minus 24 centimeters across. So that's exponentially small, really, really small. He said smaller than a proton. And also amazing, it would have contained only about 25 pounds of matter. This is somebody that people trusted enough to put in a magazine, and a science magazine, and say this. And theorize this, because there's no proof of this, right? So is that very plausible? How plausible is that? How plausible is that everything in this church building came from 25 pounds of matter? Everything in this church building. One of these pews weighs at least 5 times that, right? How plausible is it to believe that that everything on North Jefferson came from 25 pounds of matter, that it expanded to that point? How plausible is it to believe that everything in the city of Mount Pleasant came from that? Let's go further than that. How plausible is it that everything in the state of Texas came from that? In the world? It's not plausible. It takes more faith to believe this than it does to believe in the God of the Bible. And then furthermore, what caused it? So going back to our booklet here, every effect must have sufficient cause. Is the existence of the universe greater than the existence of a house? Absolutely. Do you believe that it would be impossible for the universe to create itself? Wouldn't it be impossible for the universe to have come from nothing? If you have nothing, at one point does that nothing become something? If you start with nothing, I tell you what, and my mom and my dad used to tell me this. They go, okay, you just want to sit? You just want to sit around? You don't want to go to work? Okay, just sit there. And then see how soon your pockets fill up. And sir, nothing from nothing leaves nothing. Right, exactly. 0 times 0 is 0. Yeah. And that's not a hard concept for us to understand. It's certainly not a hard concept for children to understand either, right? Nothing from nothing means nothing. And it'll always be nothing. If we start with nothing, we'll always have nothing, right? The law of thermodynamics has that. Law of conservation of energy, law of conservation of mass. Mass is neither created nor destroyed. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. Scientific principle, right? And that's another thing is scientists would argue, well, theology doesn't, or religion cannot coexist with science, and that could not be more false. There is harmony between science and what we believe. So it's impossible for the universe to have come from nothing. Wouldn't it be equally impossible for a man to have created the universe? This is not man-made. And so you think back to that analogy of the infant building the house, right? It would be improbable or implausible for an infant to build a house. They can't do it. Can't do it. And so it's the same thing here. Man couldn't have created the universe. Anybody ever seen this picture? What's the first question that comes to mind? I'm hearing all the women say, how did it get there? But I know the men are in their seats thinking, man, I wonder if that's a 59 or a... that is actually what it is. It's actually a 59 Chevy. It's in a tree. How did it get there? Dukes of Hazzard. We could propose a lot of different things. Every effect has a significant cause, right? And so we say, how did it get there? We automatically go to that. You can ask a little kid that. How'd that get up there? You see a turtle sitting on a fence post. Ask the same question. How'd you get up there? Right? And so it's these questions that we automatically ask. It's like, how did it get up there? Let's just say this. We'll posit this scenario. Let's say that this guy in 1959 was driving down the highway, and as he drove down the highway, he hits a bug on his windshield. And the car flips through the air several times and then lands perfectly right side up in that tree. And there it sat. Going back to what you said is like, that's a 59, right? And if it sat up in that tree for any significant amount of time, it wouldn't be looking like that, right? You wouldn't see any of the color left. It'd be rusted, so it'd be moving from order to disorder. It'd be decaying, right? So if that happened. So we can observe that, right? What's wrong with that scenario though? It hit that bug, the bug hits windshield, and it flips through the air, and it lands in that tree. What's wrong with that? Oh, it would have to fly? Why? It couldn't? So gravity would come into play? Yeah? Bug doesn't have that kind of power? A bug couldn't cause that? It's too small, right? Not enough mass. So science can prove that didn't land there by what we suggested. Yet people want us to believe that science can prove that the universe came from 25 pounds of matter. Right? It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. Oh, okay. You want me? Okay. So, let's see if I recall. It was man-made. You're right. It was. It's in the Midwest somewhere. I think Wisconsin. Dan Madsen, I think is the guy's name. And what I read was that he put it up there because I guess they were cutting down trees next to the highway, and so to preserve that tree from getting cut down, he threw that truck up there. But he also uses it as kind of like a destination, it's a tree house is what it is now. And I don't know if you can see this, but from the pictures down low, they look like branches, but they're actually rebar stuck in that tree trunk so that you can actually climb up there and get up there. But I think the guy's name was Dan Madsen or something like that. He's a collector, inventor, artist. He's one of those types. He's one of those guys that'll put a truck up in a tree. But he had a friend of his with a crane, and they craned that truck up there. It's a nice truck. Anyway, that's what's that? No, but when it buds, if it'll ever bud, I don't know. You might be able to tell, but I can't tell the type of tree that it is. So, trucks and trees. What did you learn in Bible class today? Must the builder of the universe come from outside the universe itself? That would go back to, did the universe create itself, right? So something had to have been outside of the universe itself and have significant ability, power, fill in the blank, to do so, right? Okay, so we know that the builder of the universe must have come from outside the universe itself. Must the builder of the universe be greater in ability and power than the universe? And the answer to that is yes. And then, must the builder of the universe be older than the universe? Right, and also you can't go back in time and make something, right? It doesn't work that way. Does the fact that we apply a date to the universe imply that it had a beginning and therefore has not always existed? Yes, absolutely, and that's what scientists believe as well. It is not possible for material things to be eternal. That's going back to that shoe, right? It didn't always exist, or going back to the house, it didn't always exist. Is it possible for a non-material power like the mind or spirit to be eternal? Pay attention to that non-material. Non-material power like mind or spirit to be eternal. It could. We only have evidence to show us and to point to what the material world can show us. That's what's empirical. You can touch it, feel it, taste it, smell it, see it, hear it. That's empirical. So the first law of thermodynamics, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. That's true. And if we called the power God, is it possible that God could be eternal and also the builder of the universe? Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Just the amazing complexity of what it takes in order to sustain life on the planet, that's a whole other study, but it's an incredible study. There can't be variance in the way that it's set in motion. If the earth on its axis is tilted less than a degree in one direction or the other, we can't sustain life. We can't sustain life the way that it is. If anything was changed, I mean, think about, like, if we were just, a few miles closer to the sun or further away from the sun, it would be too cold. Too close, it's too hot. How many thermostats on the building? Is it 6 of them? There's 6 of them, I think, right? 6 thermostats. And we can't deal with a variance of more than a couple degrees on that. I know, because I sit next to 2 women who are hot and cold natured. Sorry. She gave me the stink eye. But we can't come to agreement on that. And so God knew in his infinite wisdom that it had to be a certain distance away. Every design must have a designer. Wouldn't it be impossible for a camera to build itself? If you stumble upon a camera in a field, you'd first say, how did it get here? And then you wouldn't believe for a moment that it just built itself. Can a camera appear from nothing? No. Does the existence of a camera demand that it came from something? It's probably got the company's name on the side, right? Probably got Canon or Nikon or Sony or something on the side that would tell us that it didn't come from nothing, it came from something. And wouldn't the creation of the camera require someone superior and exterior as the creator? Somebody with the power, somebody with the ability, somebody with the materials had to assemble this thing. And does the camera demonstrate complex design? Yes. Wouldn't it be absurd to believe that the camera could be created by an explosion at a parts factory? Order does not come from disorder. It cannot. Is the human eye greater than the camera? It can discern way more than a camera can. And it's smaller. Now some of the cameras are getting really, really good. Some of the cameras are getting really, really good, but they're still no comparison to the human eye. They still don't process information as quickly or as well as the human eye does. So if a camera requires a superior and exterior creator, would the human eye also require a superior and exterior creator? Somebody made my shoe. And they had a creator. Someone made that camera and it had a creator too. So in summary, this is to close out this section. I think this booklet's divided up into 3 sections. It says, does a design require a designer? Answer to that is yes. Does the universe demonstrate characteristics of design? Yes, absolutely. And does the human body demonstrate characteristics of design? Immensely so. And we're going to talk about that next week. And then, therefore, would it be reasonable to conclude that the universe must have a designer? Evidence point to that, right? Psalm 139, I will praise you, for I am fearfully and what? Wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. Psalm 139. Thank you for your input, and look forward to seeing you again next week.